Community. I thank you for Bradley County Schools, all the teachers, all the employees, all the administrators, the school board that's represented here tonight. Father, as a dad of 3 students in 3 different Bradley County schools, I count it blessed to have my children educated by these fine educators. And I pray you continue to give them the encouragement and the strength as they continue to do what you have equipped them to do. I pray for a productive meeting tonight, and that you give all the students and teachers and administrators a great spring break next week. We love you, Lord. Pray you guide this meeting now in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
I call to order and welcome you to the Bradley County Board of Education regular meeting for March the 9th, 2023. Before we get started, we have a couple of commissioners here tonight I would like to recognize. We have Chairman Tom Cry, Commissioner Deanie Collins, and Commissioner Tommy Ledford sitting in the back. At this time, we will do the pledge to the flag. Ms. Goins, will you lead us in the pledge?
Oh, yeah, sure. Salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No, we got it.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items they would like to pull from the consent agenda at this time?
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull item 4D, the bids on the North Lee, Oakwood Middle, and Lake Forest roof.
Item 4D1.
D1, yes.
All right, we will move item 4D1 to under item number 13. Or actually, we'll put it after number 12.
I would also like to pull, under the policy review, policy number 5, it's 6.3071. I'd like to move it for discussion also.
What's the title of that, Mr.
Student alcohol and drug testing.
Okay. So we will leave that below the bids for North Lee and Lake Forest. So let's see.
So Josh, can I ask a question with that? Just make sure I understand. I'm
After we
sorry.
do the motion.
I apologize.
So we have those 2 items removed. Is there any other items that we would like to remove?
Yes, Madam Chair. D3, the goal for cafeteria tables and chairs.
D3.
For discussion, and then also the policy 6.309, the zero tolerance offense.
Okay. So we're going to move 4D1, 4D3, 4E, policy 6.307, and policy 6.309 after item number 12. Are there any other items to pull from the consent agenda? If not, with the exception of those 4 items, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Dr. Livingston?
No, I just wait till the discussion, I'm sorry. I just wait till the discussion to you. When we discussed, when we pulled.
Oh, the ones we pulled?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Are there any other discussions? If not, Miranda, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vicky Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. Ted Bryson,
Yes.
Ms. Amanda Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Josh Taylor,
Yes.
Dr. Jack Lovingood,
Yes.
Ms. Rachel Goins.
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is persons requesting to address the board. No one signed up, is that correct? Moving on to the Director of Schools report, Dr. Linda Cash.
Yes, thank you. I really want to appreciate the great things that are happening in our school system. So before we start, I just want to say that we have a slideshow with some district celebrations, and as we go through them, I just want to talk about each one of them. So there's so many great things. We only have a small sampling, but if you will look, the first one is our elementary schools. So Parkview had a lot of students that advanced to the county round of the 4-H competition, and you see that picture. In elementary basketball, North Lee was second and third grade girls champions. And then Waterville Elementary was your 4th and 5th grade girls champions. North Lee Elementary also secured the championship for 2nd and 3rd grade boys, 4th and 5th grade boys. And then if you see at that bottom left, and I know we had a lot of people there, the Bradley County Honor Choir had their 10th annual concert. We had students from each elementary school, and it was 4th and 5th grade, or just 5th grade, and they came to perform, and I was there, and it was amazing. And if you haven't experienced the Honor Choir, they practice at their individual schools, and then they come together for one day to practice and pull it all together, and it was phenomenal. And want to thank our music teachers for spearheading that and taking care of that. In slide 2, you have Miranda, teacher at Taylor Elementary School, received the TVA STEM grant of $5,000. Woohoo, that's a lot. She was also selected to present at the 2023 Tennessee TIM Innovation Summit in Nashville. So they're doing great things there. And then Amanda Price, teacher at Taylor Elementary, received the Curriculum Associate Extraordinary Educator Award. So a lot of great things. And then Taylor had our first Young Authors Conference and Science Fair. We challenged them to have a science fair this year, so they showcased writing work from all grades, kindergarten through 3rd, and the science fair projects were from all 4th and 5th grade students. And then Minsoon Green Willard, teacher at Taylor Elementary, won the Tennessee Lottery Educator of the Week during the week of February 14th. And on slide 3, just look at the fabulous things that are happening. Ocoee Middle School hosted an archery tournament for 10 guest schools and 194 archers from Meigs, Hamilton, White, and Bradley counties. Ocoee Middle came out on top and won the tournament. In Sparta, OMS competed against 6 other middle schools and placed first in that tournament as well. So it's been, I don't think Dr. Fisher is here, but we started archery several years ago, and I challenged all my elementary schools and then my middle and high to start archery clubs, and those are your results. Now we have surrounding counties coming to us. Also in Ocoee, the 8th grade boys basketball had a great season. They finished their season as district champions and regional qualifiers, and they are in the top 16 in the state. And then last month, the Beta Club donated over $600 in money good to the Bradley County SPCA and left encouraging notes in all lockers for Kindness Week. This week, the Beta has 11 students, 6 through 8, attending the leadership conference. So as you can see, we're trying to build them all around and give them opportunities everywhere. And then if we will look at Walker, at the next slide, Walker Valley. I want to kind of point out to y'all, and this is just out of order, but the 2 guitarists pay close attention to this, and I am not going to say this word right. Sebastian Gonzalez and Abby Lanclose had their guitar design selected to participate in 2023 Epiphone Student Guitar Design Contest. Their guitars are on display in the Songbirds Guitar Museum in Chattanooga starting in April. That's a big deal. Again, the Walker Valley Archery team has won numerous tournaments, scoring higher than last year's state champions. And then Drew Burrows, the trombonist, made All-State Concert Band and All-State Jazz Band. Both Walker Valley boys and girls basketball made it to the region finals. So we've got lots of great things going on there. In Lake Forest Volleyball, the Lake Forest Volleyball was the Bear Paw Invitational Tournament champions. Cameron Meeks finished his wrestling season undefeated in the 2023 AAU state champs. And the Revolution Show Choir has been busy competing in tournaments all over the Southeast. At the Albertville Diamond Classic Invitational, they placed 3rd and won the Spirit Award. In the Homewood South Classic, they were first runner-up. They also placed first runner-up in the Auburn Show Choir Showdown and received the Best Show Design. And at the South Dearborn Opening Night Showcase, they were first runner-up, and Kifton Blackwell received Best Male Vocalist. So again, our students really shining, so that's great. And then Bradley Central High School, and the Interact Club President, Hannah Marr, won the James L. Lacey Scholarship at the recent Rotary District 6780 Interact Conference. So we've got winners from everywhere. Track athlete Brody Morgan placed 2nd in the state and set a new school record in weight throw with a distance of 15.87 meters. Wrestler Knox Watson and Natalia Shane were runners-up in the state tournament, And Bryson Terrell, Ethan Lipsy, and Luke Belcher were first-place state champions. And then the Bradley Barretts are your district and region 4A basketball champs. The Barretts went on to win their game yesterday at Sub-State and will play again tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern. Knox Watson and Marcus Gorey were named the TSAA 6A All-State football team. Bradley FFA received their 54th Gold Emblem Award, which CTE Supervisor Arlette Robinson will further discuss. And within the FFA, the soil judging team, livestock judging team, and landscaping were all state finalists. So I want you to give all of these schools a round of applause. I think it's really important when we can to highlight all the great things happening in our schools. And this is just a touch of what's happening and the things that are going on. But I just really think we need to shout out that public education does a fabulous job and that Bradley County is always pushing forward and giving our students opportunities. So the next thing you're going to say in line with our strategic plan in telling our story and highlighting and providing opportunities is our next video in our Reach Higher series, and this is Arts and Education. March is Arts and Education Month.
I feel so blessed to work in a school system that values arts education. It is proven over and over that there are benefits, health benefits, brain benefits, myelinating pathways in our brains that would never occur apart from arts in education. And most students would never be exposed to the arts apart from what we give them in school.
The arts are so culturally enriching for our students. A lot of our students don't always get to fly to Europe or go on overseas trips or things of that nature, but the arts are so culturally enriching in what we do. Having been a former arts educator, I know all too well how important the arts are to children. Talent's one of those things that doesn't discriminate. We have children from all walks of life, all different demographics that come to us, and it's our responsibility as arts educators to cultivate those talents.
Arts are so important in the elementary school because it taps a different group of children. We celebrate kids all day long, but a lot of times it is for reading or so when we can celebrate visual art or the gifts of music in a child, it just impacts so many different children, and it celebrates a different kid.
It is easy to demonstrate scientifically through meta-analyses of all the studies out there that being involved in music programs 100% helps create better human beings. Students who work hard are committed to improvement or doing things better. And then we also know, maybe not causation, but correlation, that musicians and artists and thespians are generally your brightest students in the building.
Children that are involved in the arts, whether it be visual arts, instrumental music, choral music, drama, theater. The studies have shown that students that are involved in those programs proceed much better academically and rarely have any discipline situations or problems whatsoever.
When children are learning music or doing art, they're learning to be creative and flexible in their thinking. That will apply to math and to reading. So for me, a perfect school would be one where we have arts every day for all children.
I don't want to ever be guilty of justifying the arts just for the things that it makes us better at. I'm a proponent of the arts for the sake of the arts because it makes better humans.
So that's just sharing with you the arts in our schools and how fabulous it is. I also had the opportunity this past weekend to attend a play at Black Fox, which was just outstanding as well. So it's all over, and I encourage you when you see it to try to make it there. I have just two things, and then I promise I'll be quiet. So our Make a Change Day started several years ago. This year it is March 31st. And just to bring it home, since we created this day, we've been able to raise over $60,000 to offset the cost of our SAC PAC program. The program is vital to our students each and every week. Make a Change Day this year is March 31st, so mark your calendars. Just like everything else, the cost of a SAC PAC has increased, so this year it's even more important that we get involved to support our students who need our assistance on the weekends and after school. I appreciate your commitment as we work together to make a difference in the lives of our students. And I want to give a shout out to Prospect Elementary and Mr. Montgomery for leading this day for all these years. And we are so proud of the work and basically you're bringing in change and giving change to the schools, and in turn they turn it in and it helps support the SAC PAC program. It's part of our service projects, which is also part of our strategic plan, is to teach our kids about service and how important it is to give back. But I want to just say it again, being able to raise over $60,000 to offset the SAC PAC program is an amazing, and also speaks highly of our principals and our students and our families to support those who are in need. And if you don't know, every week we send home SAC PACs for the weekend for students who may not have food at home. So that's what that program is. And then we also had our Kindergarten Rocks celebration this past week, and I do want to tell you that our numbers have increased dramatically on this day. Just from that one night alone, we registered over 502 students, and those are the students that we know are here. We typically, and hold on to your hats, a lot of times we double that number by the time school starts. So right now our current kindergarten enrollment sits at 727, and we've already enrolled 502 students for the coming year. So we are grateful to be able to serve all these students, but I wanted everybody to know, and again, thank our principals and everybody for hosting that. It's a great night and a lot of fun, but our numbers are continuing to increase, and it's because of the great work of our principals, our administrators, and our families. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Moving on to the next item is item number 7, middle school athletics. Mr. Jacob Wilcutt and Mr. Andy Jenkins.
Hey, good evening to the board. Thank you very much for the opportunity for Mr. Jenkins and myself to come and talk to you about some exciting things happening at Cohen Middle School and Lake Forest. The reason that we are here tonight is to provide some information for the board for two movements in sports that are going to be happening starting with the 2023 and 2024 athletic season. Starting this fall, we will be changing 2 of our female sports seasons. The first is softball. Historically, softball has been played in the fall. Many of you guys know that around here for the middle school level. It's been played from about the beginning of August and ends at fall break. Starting with this next season, we will be transitioning that season to the spring. Now that will mirror the middle school baseball season, which starts at the beginning of February and will wrap up around middle of May. Also, we will be shifting our volleyball season that has been a pseudo winter season that runs from January till spring break. We will shift that to the fall, and it will replace that softball season that goes from August until fall break. You know, we've been, Mr. Jenkins and I have been, and Mr. Stevenson, Dr. Lindbergh, we've been keeping our pulse on this change really for the last 2 years about, when it was really a good idea for us to move this for our student athletes and really the climate of the schools around us and other districts. And we just really believe, Mr. Jenkins and I do, that this is a great time for us to move, and it's best for our student athletes. We also know that that's going to affect a lot of our current student athletes, future student athletes, members of the community. So Mr. Jenkins, he is going to walk through some of our reasons and justifications for why we're making this move, and hopefully provide some clarity for all of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jake. First, wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to come and talk about something that's very near and dear to Jake and I, is allowing our students, most importantly our female athletes, to compete at the state championship level with other school systems in the state of Tennessee. As it stands now, volleyball and softball are not able to do that. So switching seasons would allow our girls, our teams, to be able to compete at that level, which we know they're more than capable of doing so. Next would be just the ability, particularly for us, moving volleyball to the fall. It opens up the gym access so much more for basketball, wrestling, all these things that are going on in the fall or the winter months. So it also helps us with just opening up space for our other athletes. It makes it a lot easier so that parents aren't having to come in at 6 a.m. to, practice and condition their kids for basketball. And that's something that as sixth grade parents, Miss Lee has done many a time last year. And so it really, we're thankful that this is going to give them the opportunity to not have to do that any longer. It would also, one of the big things with volleyball and softball over the last 2 or 3 years has been actually scheduling other schools. Being in Bradley County, they see us, they look at our schools' enrollments, and they automatically, they do not want to play us or schedule us, the small schools, which is not necessarily a correlation of how good your teams actually are. But most of these schools, it was very, very, very difficult this past season to schedule volleyball matches, particularly. And it gives our coaches the ability to be able to move more to a high school calendar, sports calendar, and be able to schedule those teams that are already playing, our 2 high schools with Walker Valley and Bradley, and I believe it would make the overall athletic program of Bradley County better off. Thank you.
I just have one question.
Yeah,
On the floor. And this just pertains to you, Mr. Roca.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure that you've already looked into that, but just want to make sure, because you're in a different predicament than Lake Forest, as you don't have a softball field.
Yeah, we do not have a softball field, and that was part of, and as we met and talked and met with Dr. Cash, that was a big part of the plan that we need to figure out. We believe that we've come up with a plan with Walker Valley. We're going to partner with them and some adjustments that they've made where we believe we're still going to be able to use their facilities for practice and for games. There's some other things that we're meeting with Lee to hopefully make some adjustments to utilize some of the space at our school for when it rains or other adjustments we may have to make. But yes, we don't have a softball field. Walker Valley's been so gracious to let us use their facilities. We believe that's going to continue, and we're going to make it work at whatever we need to do for the athletes.
Any other questions?
You used to have one, what happened?
Yeah, sir, I'm sorry.
You used to have a softball field, what happened? Did
What?
you not?
Yeah, I've been there 5 years. We have not had one then. To my knowledge, I didn't think that we had a softball. Okay, a softball.
Yeah, we still do. So.
For anybody that don't know, we put a lot of money into it, and you had a lot of trouble with it. We're about to close it down, correct?
That's
what he said, or she said.
Well, it
Needed
was,
money, it needed a lot of
it
work.
needed some work, yeah, we'll say that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question, thank you for the information, but my question is, so you're moving volleyball to the fall, when did you say these, like your actual time frame is?
You know, it will follow, volleyball will follow very similar to our fall sports schedule. They are able to actually start although some sports don't have rules on summer practice, most of our sports will start practice right after the dead period, the first week of July, and they'll crank up practice then. You have to practice for 2 weeks before you can play a game. So most of our sports, we try not to play games before school starts, just for transportation purposes.
Well, the reason why I asked, would this require some athletes to choose? Because a lot of the girls play, and I'm saying girls, play basketball and softball.
It won't affect basketball at all.
Okay.
Basketball is a winter sport. Doesn't actually start up with, conditioning and those things until October practices, and then the season starts in November, so it won't affect basketball. Now, it will affect, if a girl wanted to do tennis or softball or cross country, they'll have to make that decision, but, we have tons of choices they can make, so we're excited about that.
Okay, yeah, that's a great thing. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Madam Chairman, in my excitement of telling you all great things that are going on in our schools, I did want to come back to one area. I have recently started talking to my principals about developing committees to develop guidelines and a whole program to recognize our high school alumni for many things, not only just athletics, but if they've done entrepreneurship, great things, or they've just had lifetime achievements. I'd like to bring that to the attention of this board and request that my principals, both of them, reach out to our board members and to begin that committee appointees and form a committee to develop some guidelines and rules and start that process. Of course, that would be with the principal's guidance, working with the two board members of those schools, and then reaching out to other members of our community to help them come up with those guidelines and rules and regs so that we can start recognizing alumni who've done great things.
I think that's brilliant. I think we have such a strong history in our community, in our schools, and to recognize people for their achievements, not only academically, athletically, arts. I just think it'd be wise because we have such a rich history in Bradley County, and to get our community involvement, I think it will be a great celebration.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, Ms. Refner, if you would just after spring break put that on a calendar for a meeting with those two high school principals so that we can set some dates to get that started. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the National Gold Chapter Recognition. Ms. Arlette Robinson.
Thank you so much for letting me come to you again with this remarkable group of students. I'm going to ask them to come on in. They're led by Miss Luann Carey and Mr. Jamie Haynes. and we have a friend today, so I'm going to be outdone by our animal behind us. I want to say that in October they were awarded the 55th consecutive year of National Gold Chapter. That is so challenging, and this team works so very hard to do that. We come before you today because one of the goals that they have is to present agriculture out into the public, and this is meeting one of their goals by letting you know about their agricultural program and what they have done. So we are so very pleased to have them. We're so very pleased that they have this recognition. And then I want to turn over to Mr. Haynes and let him introduce this group of officers and then let them tell you about their work.
For the National Chapter, our goal tonight was to introduce to you 5 of our kids. And before I let them talk for a second, I want to point out two things, that this is a program that's leadership-based, but it's student-led. So a lot of the activities that you do, if you come to the greenhouse, or if you come to Farm Day, and there's numerous other activities that we do, it's organized by them, and it's led by them, and I'm really proud of that. And I also want to say that I appreciate the support that we get from assistant principals to the central office. We really appreciate you. But I asked these four outstanding kids to introduce themselves and to tell you what their favorite part of the ag department is.
My name is Luke Milligan. I'm a sophomore. This is my first year being an officer. My favorite part about our FFA program is leadership camp. This past summer I got to go to Camp Clements. I got to know and meet a lot of people. Camp also taught me a bunch of leadership skills that I will use throughout the rest of my life.
I'm Savannah Sanchez. I'm a junior, and this is my second year being an officer. My favorite part of FFA is probably equine science, and in that I do the horse bowl, and we recently went to a state horse judging competition, and in that we have to give a set of oral reasons to judges, and I think that really helps me build up the confidence and be able to learn public speaking.
My name is Hoss Brewer, and my favorite part of our program is ag mechanics, because we get to be hands-on and we get to use what we learn in the field. And I'm one of the 4 school judges that went to state and almost made it to Oklahoma, but we didn't get it this year, and I hope we do next year.
My name is Ender Haywood. I'm a senior. I am the president of Bradley FFA this year. My favorite part of this program is the animal science and veterinary science at Bradley. 2 of the competitions that fall under that is livestock judging and poultry judging, which are my favorites. They have granted me skills that I know I will need in my future career of an agriculture educator. We also have, oh, I'm going to do this baby. We also have souvenirs from Luann Terry, the other agriculture teacher, on our way back from international convention, getting our 55th consecutive gold emblem. And I'm just going to give it to you, and just before y'all leave, just make sure to come by and pick up one of them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So part of their goals and documenting their goals is to get a picture with you guys. So if we can get you guys to stand, and then they'll come over here and we'll get a picture. And then if one of you want to hold the goat, then I'm sure that they'll let you do that. I love the kid. Do you guys want to come around this way? Go over, okay? I think he's bottle feeding him. Aren't you bottle feeding? Where's you going?
Just don't pee on me. Just don't pee on me. Wait, no. Yeah, you just hold the kid.
You just hold.
Oh, you're going to get me next to the kid, are you?
Thank you so much.
The next item on the agenda is the ESSER 3.0 public plan. Ms. Carrie Murray is not here today, so Ms. Dana Yost is going to speak.
Hi. So ESSER 3 is about spin out. We did make a recent change according to Ms. Murray. There were over-predicted employee line item or employee and benefits in that line item, and we have now moved that to materials and supplies and tutoring, which in just a moment you will hear a lot more about that.
Madam Chairman, I do want to know, we are required to give the board updates on ESSER. So anytime there's a change, and we have to document that we have updated the board. So we appreciate you just listening to what we have to do.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions further discussed? If not, the next item on the agenda is the third grade retention presentation, which will be done by Ms. Dana Yost and Ms. Elizabeth Taylor.
You have a blue folder, hopefully there at your seat, and there are only a couple of items in it, but we will reference those as we're talking this evening.
So just to give you some background regarding reading instruction and reading instruction in Bradley County Schools, we all know that in order for students to be successful, there must be targeted support and intentional instruction. And the instruction needs to be focused in the 5 big areas: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Phonemic awareness is taught in grades K and 1. Phonics taught in K through the first part of 3rd grade. Fluency is taught K through 5th. Vocabulary taught K through 12th, and comprehension taught K through 8. We also need to understand that learning to read is developmental, and not all students acquire literacy at the same rate. Therefore, we have tiered intervention in place. So let me explain just a little bit of that to you. Tier 1 is that everyday reading instruction that occurs inside the classroom. It is using our reliable, consistent curriculum, which we do have and utilize daily. Tier 2 intervention is for students for whom we have been monitoring their progress and we see that there are gaps that might need to be filled. And so that is an additional 30 minutes of instruction for those students. If then we see that we are not closing the gap, then Tier 3 is then put into place for that student, and that is an additional 60 minutes of reading instruction 4 days out of the week. And then there's also Tier 4 where a student is identified as having a learning disability, and then special education services will also provide reading support. So in Bradley County Schools, reading instruction is above par, and here's why. Not only do we do all those things that I just mentioned, such as whole group reading instruction on a daily basis, extensive phonemic awareness and phonics instruction daily, and routine instruction in those 5 core reading areas that I just talked about. But we also provide reading workshop, which is an additional 45 minutes of instruction that is targeted to that student's needs. Differentiated instruction, if you will. And in the course of a week, we provide quizzes and assessments and progress monitoring so that we are tracking the progress of our students. Students with significant deficiencies receive Tier 2 or Tier 3 interventions, and that is monitored using a progress monitoring tool, AIMSweb. Parents are certainly notified if their child is placed in a tiered intervention, and we send home progress reports every 4.5 weeks to parents.
So in addition to providing a lot of support academically for students through instructional programming, we also do a lot to analyze assessments and really look at the data of our students so that we are aware of their abilities. So on this slide, you'll see a list of the assessments that we use to really hone in on a student's reading ability. So the first one here is the Tennessee Universal Reading Screener. That's administered 3 times a year, and it varies in difficulty, increasingly difficult as the child moves up through their grades. So it may look simply like something where a student is having to identify the letters of the alphabet in kindergarten, but by the time they are in 3rd grade, they're expected to read passages of 3rd grade level proficiency with a fluent prosody and expression when they're reading. The benchmark tests are administered 3 times a year also. These are directly connected to our state standards, so students are being assessed in those, but that is an adaptive test. So a student who is above grade level is able to demonstrate above grade level performance because the test becomes increasingly difficult the more questions that you are getting right. The reverse is also true. The questions become increasingly easier or below grade level if you are having difficulty answering the grade level questions correctly. And so this assessment really allows us to identify the strengths and weaknesses of each individual student. Progress monitoring, you heard Mrs. Yost mention our interventions. We really work to look at that data tightly, so that's an every week test for the students who are receiving those interventions. And then TCAP. TCAP is the one that has been talked about a lot lately because of this 3rd grade retention law. And so I want to dig in a little more specifically on that assessment so that you can have some understanding of how that data differs from the other data that we receive. So this is beginning at the end of 2nd grade. The student takes TCAP for the very first time. So we have 1 TCAP score on a student from their 2nd grade year if they have indeed been with us when they were in 2nd grade. As we are moving into 3rd grade, we have that 1 data point to consider. And then they take it every year after that as they move on through elementary school. So that is an assessment of the state standards, but oftentimes people are a bit misled by how those standards are assessed because the standards analysis reports that we receive from the state for TCAP indicate to us that the state standards are not equitably assessed from year to year. So if a teacher takes the 3rd grade standard report from 2001 or 21, excuse me, they might find a different set of standards numbers listed than they would if they look at the 2022 report, where again, it is still considered a measure of 3rd grade, but there might be a different set of standards because we have over 80-something different standards that a 3rd grader is expected to master during their 3rd grade year. All of those cannot reasonably be assessed in one individual TCAP administration. So the difficulty for a teacher then is that from year to year, that test may be identifying different standards, and it can feel a bit like a moving target for a teacher because of that, where these other tests are a little more cut and dry and a little more predictable what kind of experience a student will have. Absolutely.
You did a great job. So in the assessing of a student, what is the involvement of the parenting process? So if in essence, I have a student's at this level and have to bring a student into the special ed process, at what part of the evaluation is the parent brought into the situation?
Absolutely, great question. So if a student is in intervention, then a parent is receiving a copy that actually puts a visual graph to that progress monitoring that their child is having, and those are sent home every month so they can see whether their child is moving upward or flatlining or what might that graph be revealing about their child's performance in an intervention. And so that update is very frequent because that data is collected every week. As it comes to things like benchmark assessments or the universal screener, those are typically communicated through parent conference nights and those kinds of things because they're only administered 3 times a year, and so you don't have this high volume of that data the way you do the progress monitoring. Now, TCAP assessment, unfortunately, in previous years, you take that test in late April, maybe even the first couple of days of May, we're still finishing up that test, but you don't receive those scores until about September of the next school year. So you aren't able to give very timely results back to the parent, not of our own choosing, but simply because that's when we get the data back from the state.
How do you adjust? How does a teacher or a parent adjust if they get, so if the assessment is gotten back in September, test is taken in April, how do I adjust the training and the education of the student that is lagging behind the TCAP test, which is assessing whether I'm going to retain, the way I understand it, Dr. Cash, whether I'm going to retain 3rd grade?
Agreed. It is concerning that so much emphasis would be placed on a test that we don't have as good a handle on as we do these other assessments. For educators, the other assessments you see listed on the screen hold great power and weight. Those are results we get immediately. You know what a child scores on the benchmark test the minute they click their last answer into the computer. You know what they get on the universal screener because you as the teacher are sitting there witnessing every answer and marking it as their educator as they are progressing through the test. So these are things we have immediate results on. We're able to really dig into that data. And I will say, actually, our benchmark tests give us some fairly predictive scores. So we have really been able to dig into that data most especially to look at what does the benchmark predict a student's TCAP score might be. And that has held some power for us because unfortunately we don't always see those TCAP numbers coming back as quickly as we would like. Now we do dig in the minute that we get them and we do try to make adjustments at that point, but
Put you behind the 8 ball.
it does, yes it does.
Assessing the retention rate of a third grader related to the TCAP, the way I understand it, the TCAP test.
Yes, yes. And so at this point, it feels a little bit like those infomercials where they say, but wait, there's more.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have more things for you to love about TCAP. So the second bullet that you see here points out the 65th percentile as the measure of proficiency on the third grade TCAP. And so this is important because I'm going to go to the next slide. Some of you may have seen the bell curve before. Maybe you use it in your own profession in various ways. But to give you a little brief synopsis, it's been labeled here with some various color codings. And so what you will see is what represents a range. What we know about the statistical value of testing metrics is that performing on grade level is not one individual point. Performing on grade level is a range. There is a range that is defined as an average performance. And so you can see that marked in green from one green line on one side of the highest point to the other green line on the other side of that highest point of this curve is marking the grade level range. And so then the yellow is where you start to see there being some risk for a student. Those are students that we might have placed in Tier 2 intervention. When you get over into the high risk areas, you're seeing Tier 3 or Tier 4 interventions available for a student. So I'm going to point out on this slide for you, if I might, that right here, just barely above, or barely below, I should say, this highest green line is where the 65th percentile is. So what that means when we are interpreting third grade TCAP scores is that the student is having to perform in the highest end of that average range in order to do what is considered proficient performance on that test. And that's an important piece of information both for educators, parents, or anyone else who would look at that data to understand.
Madam Chair. So, Ms. Kaler, one of the things that I want everyone to understand is the difference between proficiency and grade level. So when you look at that bell curve, it doesn't, if a child is in that range, and they still may have some risk, they are actually working on grade level. They are on grade level, they are using grade level material, but they may not have reached the proficiency level to hit that every single time they take it, or it may even be a different set of standards that they've been assessed on. So that's why we've been talking to the legislatures about you need to look in that average range, because if a kid's in the average range, they are performing on grade level. It's just where do they fall in that range. But the cutoff, and that's what we call them, where's the cutoff score? That cutoff score is at the 65th percentile, which means if they're going to score proficient, that's how far that is. So they are right at the top of that proficiency, moving into that advanced range. And so we're trying, in all honesty, to, and they are listening, I do want to say they are listening, and making some movements on what that looks like for a student. So as we go through what we are doing and what we can do, we'll talk to you about the waiver that's in place, and there's some new information that's out, that's coming out that we hope is going to pass as well. Thank you.
I have a question. Is the TCAP still paper pencil?
It is for
Oh,
elementary
for third
school.
grade it is.
Okay, what about the iReady? Now, that is on the, what device do you use for the iReady?
That's a Chromebook administered
Chromebook,
test.
okay.
So now let's talk about what happens after we take TCAP and we get those results, and when we get those results. So there are two categories that we're going to talk about. Sorry. Let's back up. Let's talk first about what parents and educators know right now about our third grade students. So as Ms. Kaler said, students are screened 3 times each year using our iReady benchmark assessments. The winter results have already been shared with parents. And the predictions for TCAP proficiency have come from our iReady benchmark assessments because we do find that it is highly correlated. And again, parents have been notified if their student is not predicted to meet TCAP expectations. So a letter has been sent home, and in many instances, conferences or phone calls have also occurred. Tutoring or interventions are provided for students. That is already in place for those that we feel we have the data and know that these students may not be proficient on TCAP. Tutoring and interventions are designed to close this gap and to help them be proficient. So now let's talk about what happens after we give the assessment and receive the results. So we're talking about 2 different levels here. We're talking about below expectations and approaching expectations. So on the left-hand side, you can see if a student scores below expectations, they will be retained, and we're saying in 4th grade because we're not 100% sure when these results will be received by our district. Unless the student attends summer school with a 90% attendance rate and demonstrates adequate growth on the post-test. And the student attends tutoring during his or her 4th grade year.
So it's not or,
It's and for below.
In the below range.
Now, if they score in the approaching range, they will be retained unless the student attends summer school with 90% attendance and demonstrates adequate growth per the post-test results, or they attend tutoring. Now, there is also the option of retaking the test. And during the retest, we will get the results immediately, because there will not be the writing portion of the assessment. It is our understanding that it will be a multiple choice assessment.
And to speak to your question earlier, Ms. Beatty, the fact that our students have experience taking their benchmark assessment on Chromebooks will be very helpful for that retest, because it will be a computerized test, not a paper pencil like the first version is.
But if they do not meet the expectation in the retake, then this would apply depending on how they score.
Has there been any mention as to if all of the requirements to attend summer school, how they're going to get there? Who's going to provide the transportation? Or who's going to get there?
We are.
Madam Chair, just to address that, in the governor's budget, he has included not only the funding for summer school, but the funding for transportation. So that is a part of that. They've already begun working with Mr. McElhaney in getting those routes in line and trying to get ahead of the curve, but the funding for transportation is in the governor's budget.
What about the funding for the tutoring? Is there going to be out-of-pocket expense for the parents?
No.
As we move into the budget later on in April, in TISA, there's earmarked money for that. There's also, we haven't seen the full thing yet because it hasn't been passed, funding for tutoring in the governor's budget as well, because I think their prediction is we will have a large amount of students needing these services across the state of Tennessee.
Well, I'm going to ask this question. I don't know if I'm supposed to, but how many do we feel like that we have percentage-wise below this right now in that the and category?
The and.
Yeah.
That's a great
Do
question.
you want me to take it?
Yeah, well, we have quite a few students that we have already placed into tutoring groups. We took our winter benchmark scores and made our best predictions for TCAP. So this was our attempt to get in front of the law. The law says the tutoring happens after you've taken the third grade assessment, but we are actually providing tutoring now before they have taken the third grade assessment, because if a student is close in any way and we can get them over that hump, we want to do that.
Sure.
So currently, I don't think we have any school where we don't have probably at least 30 students in third grade who are currently participating in tutoring based on having been identified with a prediction using the current data that we have.
So these interventions and things they're pretty reactive, pretty quick.
Well, all of our interventions are research-based, and students are placed in intervention groups according to their deficits. So it's targeted instruction, and our interventionists do a marvelous job. So yes, we do see a lot of progress. But the other thing that you need to remember about the TCAP assessment is that we aren't just measuring reading ability. Grammar and writing are also incorporated into this reading score. So we aren't just measuring fluency and comprehension.
Our tutoring groups are also by deficit area. So at each school, there's a curriculum for a third grader who needs support in decoding and phonics. There's a curriculum for students who need to improve their fluency. There's a curriculum for students who need to improve their comprehension. And they are able to get then their needs addressed by the area in which their deficit exists.
So does that tutoring check the box for the tutoring that would be required if they still don't meet that mark?
Well, the tutoring we're doing right now is preemptive, and that's just us being dutiful educators who want to do right by children. The tutoring the law requires would occur after we have their third grade score and the child is in the fourth grade.
So this is the intent to catch it on the front end so they don't get that score?
That's correct.
What I thought that's what it was.
Yes. Now, we will do the tutoring on the back end too, because that's what the law requires us to do, but we couldn't in good conscience sit and look at a child that we think might not get this score and not do everything within our power beforehand to address that.
What if he don't? How long are we gonna keep him in the third grade?
Well, the law says that they will only be retained one time. And actually, that kind of takes me here to the next slide.
If you guys would address toward the chair so that we can get everybody's questions answered, but I did want to go back to something that Mr. Taylor asked. I asked Mr. Collins to try to predict numbers for us of those that were below, and that we looked at, Mr. Collins, about 10 per elementary school that did not fall into some exemption categories as we were predicting, but that's all it is a prediction.
Sure.
We don't actually have all the numbers, but when you talk about the ones that hit the die-hard, that would need both, in that below category, that would need both the summer school as well as the tutoring. You're looking at about 150 kids, is that what we?
There's 721 third graders last year that were tested. 400 would fall into both categories total.
And both categories are those approaching, and as we go on, you'll understand that in the approaching category, if those kids have, and I'm probably jumping ahead, but there are some caveats in there that because they're on grade level, and we did have to voice our opinions and talk to our legislatures and talk to the department about those grade level kids that would not be retained, but would move on, and I'm sure they'll get to that. So it sounds awful, but it's really, and I can only speak for Bradley County right now, we are actually doing a really good job of providing for our students, and we have more students. If you look at the approaching range and the advanced, we're about 64% of our kids fall in that range. So if that gives you an idea when you're looking at that.
And I have seen some statistics on other districts where they have done the same thing as Mr. Collins was talking about, and it's much higher.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing a very good job.
I just have a question. So you stated that the TCAP was pencil and paper. But the second test was on a Chromebook, but it excludes the written portion. But you just said how important the written portion is, but it's not tested on the second one. I don't understand that part.
Yes.
And then the ones that are currently, you're getting ahead of or whatever, you're getting the jump on to try to bypass all that. Will you test them for any kind of change between now and whenever? To see if they've changed in any status at all?
Yes, they do take tests that are, but we also have to be a little bit careful because you can over-test a kid. And you can get a kid reaching test fatigue because they're just done with it. You've tested them so many times, they no longer care how they're doing. They're just sick of taking tests. So we do try to be very careful. So a lot of the data that we're looking at on students who are in tutoring is based on the work they're performing in the tutoring group so that it doesn't feel like yet another test, because you did see quite a list on that slide of tests they're already taking. So to explain to you a little further about the differences in what is assessed. So I mentioned, 80 some odd third grade ELA standards that are assessed. When they take the first version of TCAP, that includes a writing assessment. So writing is very important for a student to be able to do, but that is different than being able to read. If this third grade law is about measuring reading, then writing should really not be a part of that, because that is a separate skill set, a very needed and important skill set, but yet a separate one.
But it goes into the first TCAP score.
It does go into the first TCAP score.
Madam Chairman, just a note for the board, we had, we meaning myself and other directors, as well as the two ladies in front of you, have spoken to them about this, and they are actually looking to see if they can separate that, so that we are really just assessing reading. That's one of the caveats that we requested. We will see whether that occurs this year or not this year. So I just want to make you aware of that we have requested that. And when we presented in Nashville, that was one of the things that we pointed out, that those are two separate skills.
And that is the benefit with the retest, because with the initial administration, it's quite extensive time to grade the handwritten assessments of writing that these students are taking. And so it wouldn't be possible to produce a score in a very quick turnaround time when you're hand grading all of those essays. So on the retest, there is no writing portion, which for a student for whom that was the reason your initial score was low, then you might be at great benefit of being able to just purely demonstrate some reading skills on the retest.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Dr. Cash, how do you challenge the TCAP test being a literacy forecaster? Because it's not designed to be a literacy forecaster. It is way behind. And at what point in time are educators going to realize that we have placed a huge value in a test that is not supposed to forecast what we're saying it's supposed to forecast? When are we going to have a conversation?
Dr. Levengood, we are already having that discussion with the legislatures that make those decisions. We have actually requested not only this district, but many other districts, that they look at all of the assessments of a child and also the input of teachers and parents. At this time, they have made some concessions that they will start about, but actually I believe Ms. Kaler is the one who pointed that out in the session that we testified at, is we're using a test we're using a test for something that was not designed for. So we are still having those conversations and hoping that we get some movement. We will not get movement on that this year, but we're hoping for the future that there are some concessions made for that.
Well, and my concern about that is this: the weight of children, teachers, finances, the whole bailiwick is on a test that is evaluating students. That's not what it's meant for.
Yes, sir.
I'll make a comment, Madam Chair. The other thing also, I think maybe to try to keep in mind when we're looking at this, is that they are working on it. And you guys have been to Nashville and y'all done a great job making a point and bringing concerns. But also with this, at the end of the day, we're wanting to identify a need in our kids and our district to make sure that they're where they need to be. I mean, the kind of the intent behind the law is not bad. You know, there's some stuff we need to work out. But it's, again, at the end of the day, we're making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and doing right by our children.
Madam Chairman. Mr. Taylor, thank you for that. One of the things that we are trying to tell them is the interventions are outstanding. We do, and we appreciate them providing funding for the interventions, providing funding for summer school. But it's the retention piece that I think we need to take another look at, because as Dr. Lovingood said, we're using a test that was not what it was designed for.
Mm-hmm.
But the benefit of this is exactly what you said. We are being able to provide students the interventions and the support that they really need. So we are very much in favor of that.
There are some exemptions in this law. So there are several bullet points here of various student groups for whom support comes to them in other ways. So that means that retention does not apply to them. So those students are students who have been identified with a reading learning disability, students who've been previously retained, ELL students, that's English language learners, who have had less than 2 years of English language arts instruction, so they may be newcomers to our country. Students who are receiving reading interventions, oftentimes those students have been identified for the interventions because we already recognize the struggle they are having. So students who have a suspected learning disability in reading are also exempt. If they have an appeal approved by the Tennessee Department of Education, they can be exempt, and I'll talk about that appeal on the next slide. And then the final one is if they pass that retest. That would be the other reason that they would be exempt from the retention. So to give you a little more insight about the appeal process, well, and one thing that is important for me to point out, the very first line on this slide says no one is exempt from taking TCAP. I know there have been many people who have thought that would be their great strategy because they're very concerned about this law. They'll just be sick that week and not take the test. And unfortunately, the law is written such that no score equates to a failing score. So the worst thing that a parent could choose to do in this situation is not have their child take the test. So in the appeal process, the State Department is the one managing the appeal process, and it is applicable to any student who scores in the approaching category. So you may remember Ms. Yost talking about these two columns where student scores could fall. Any student in the approaching category has the opportunity to file an appeal if they had a 40th percentile rating or better on their universal reading screener. So that does allow us to look at some of that other data outside of just solely depending on TCAP for allowing some students to be exempt from this law. Now, students who are in the below category do not have that option. So they do need to get at least a minimum of an approaching score for this appeal to apply to them. And catastrophic events are the other reasons that an appeal can be filed.
Do you remember what the percentage was on that, on the curve, on the approaching? It was 65 on.
65 was the high end, and it is, it's like right at about 35, I want to say, on the approaching.
So just to give you the information in as far as what we've done as a district to support this implementation and do what is right by kids, we have created a tutoring plan, which we did give to you all at one of our previous meetings. We have purchased tutoring curricula. We have created a parent brochure, which I think you also have a copy of. We designed a PowerPoint for third grade parent meetings. We provided a winter parent letter notifying if students needed additional support. We have met with individual groups to communicate and problem solve. So we've met with principals, our instructional coaches, our Title I teachers, and our ESL teachers. And parent meetings for third grade parents at all schools have occurred, and we will conclude those before we go to spring break. Do you have any questions?
Any more questions?
I want to tell you something, Madam Chair. I think they're doing a great job.
They're-
What they're dealt with, and the situation dealt with, I'd be interested to know, Dr. Cash, is the percentage of people that leave our system, any system, and go to homeschool after that process, and they're just frustrated, and they're just not going to do it anymore.
I think that will be something we'll see.
That would be interesting.
And may I just take 1 minute to say how proud I am to work in this school district, because when you are leading a change such as this, our principals, teachers, Title I teachers, ESL teachers, counselors, everyone dug deep, and they've tried to communicate as best they can, and they're working with our students to the best of their abilities, and I'm just so very proud to work along such wonderful educators.
Amen.
Thank you.
I did attend a third grade meeting at one of the elementary schools, and I agree with you, Ms. Yost. They did a phenomenal job. It was led by the principal, very warm, kind, helpful, because some of the parents were, concerned, of course, but they did an excellent job with the parents, so it's commendable. Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the BCHS track updates. Mr. Kyle Page and the corporate group.
Corbett, myself, Patrick, Eddie, and Turner have been doing due diligence. We went down to the track complex at Saudi Daisy High School and took a list of things liked, disliked, engineers that worked on that project, as well as install companies that worked on that project. We did the same thing at Chattanooga Christian School, which was another one that the team from Bradley Central wanted to go check out and look at likes, dislikes, and who completed the project. So we've been gathering a lot of information, what companies were involved, what engineers were involved. We have a next step following our spring break. We are going to go over to Lee University at their request and look at that complex, that facility, and get who's been involved, who executed things. And so right now we're really gathering due diligence. And then Corbett can speak to, we are getting ready to put out the RFQ, which is request for qualifications, at which time we get our due diligence done and really begin to rein in all the information that we're getting from the team at Bradley Central.
And the other part of the due diligence is I'm pulling plans from existing facilities from some of the others to review those in comparison to what we're attempting to do. And I'm in the process of getting budgets for projects that were bid in the last 18 months so that we can have an understanding as we move into this of about what this thing, we can put a conceptual budget to it before we dive off the diving board here. But we're finalizing with that information. I think we can then kind of hone in and finalize the request for qualifications and engage an architect after spring break, kind of end of March timeframe.
So you're looking at Lee University's?
That was one of the requests that Bradley Central staff wanted to do, is go over to Lee University and look at their complex as well as the other ones.
I didn't look at that one too.
I understand. That was their request to go over and look at that facility and the way that's set up as well.
I think we need a track as bad as 100%. But I personally don't think comparing us to Lee University is a fair thing. No, Saudi Daisy, yeah. And I went by, I was down there, I don't know, is it Howard or somebody's got one around their football field?
Saudi Daisy's track is around their football field. It's a little different as far as the lay of that land. Chattanooga Central Chattanooga Christian and Lee would probably be a little more comparable as far as the way it sits. Saudi Daisy's is built down, if you've been down there, it's inside the bowl. Just like Bradley has the football field inside the bowl, we don't have enough room to fit a track inside there. Saudi Daisy had enough room to get a track inside interchangeably with the football field, similar to Walker Valley in essence, just with the topo differently. So.
You do due diligence. When you look at the soil around the track, how is it going to affect the tennis courts?
Well, yeah, well, We've got survey data at this point. We understand all the existing drainage conditions and grading. So once we engage an architect and engineer, we'll look at the modifications that need to be made to accommodate a new structure and the expansion of the track. And once all of those are sorted out, we'll engage a geotechnical engineer to go punch holes in the dirt to make sure that, the drainage feature, the primary goal of the soil investigation is to make sure that our structures and our track are not going to be, or they're going to be stable.
Do you feel good about that now?
Pardon?
Do you feel good about the stability of the track now?
Have no basis to make a characterization on that. It's I see a lot of cracking in the existing track, so I think there's probably some undercut and some better materials and some compaction that are going to benefit, are going to have to be required there. But until we get the soils tested, until we know the configuration, it's hard to say that at this point in time.
My concern is, as we do our due diligence, because I'm already concerned about our tennis courts.
For one.
I'm already concerned about our tennis courts.
And here's what I will say.
And I'm not the only one. Nancy, and I talked, she was in London last night. She texted me some concerns about that. Because what's happening is, and I want to go on the record, is I asked this question 3 times in this meeting. And I said, guys, we better be concerned about the issue with drainage at the tennis courts. And then I go to the tennis courts, and I see 10-foot poles, they're bending, they're fencing around the tennis courts. Now, I said this in the meeting 3 times.
So I will.
With due respect, I said this 3 times. I said, guys, if we don't know this, what's going to happen is we're going to have holes, cracks, runs. What happens when those poles fall on the tennis court and they move, it softens the surface, which in essence causes spider runs on the courts. We've had these courts 4 or 5 months, and my concern is we're going to look at patching these things. And Nancy asked me, she said she was concerned about what is the warranty for the courts and what is the accountability for, because we only had a few months of the concern about that fencing and the surface on the court.
So a couple of things to mention there. First off, Corbett was not involved in the tennis courts at all, so I don't want him to be involved in speaking to those.
I just know, in all due respect, because we're doing due diligence, I know the track is here.
Yes.
And the courts are here. And when we move dirt here,
So part of the civil design that will result before any track improvements are made are going to correct any drainage upstream of the tennis courts. So any track improvements are going to leave the tennis courts from a drainage perspective in a better situation.
I will also say, in reference to the tennis courts specifically, and I hear exactly what you said, and I also want to say that, and I forewarned the board and expressed hesitation about cutting the dirt when we cut the dirt and the timing we cut the dirt to start the tennis courts. That was a conversation that I expressed, and I've always, and Corbett's worked with me on a few different jobs, I always have concerns about cutting dirt at certain times of the year because of compaction concerns. With the tennis courts specifically, when the dirt was cut, we were not able to meet compaction in that budget. That was not anticipated. With that said, we got into bad dirt. And when we got into bad dirt that could not compact, we then had to put a footer under that dirt, 18 inches thick of large rock with soil silt stabilizer to meet compaction to make sure that everything was put in and the rock could build off that correctly. With that said, following that, the fence guys came in to install. The fence guys are warrantying their work, and they were out this week. They were out today. And Jack from All Fences is happy to come and speak with the board regarding his willingness to make sure those are right. He expressed to me today, he said, Kyle, we have evaluated, they were up here this week, post the phone contact and the information from Coach Elrod. As soon as I got that information, To be honest with you, he sent it to me when I was in NICU mode, and as soon as I got out, I lined that up on the schedule, and we got them up here to address those immediately. So they are resetting all the posts as we speak, not just at Bradley. They were at Bradley today. They will be working there over the weekend, and then they're going to Walker Valley to address any posts that need to be reset. As we continue, they did recommend, and I spoke with not only Charlie Smith, who is a big avid tennis person in this community, I spoke with Lee Murray, who is a big advocate of tennis and surfacing, and several other folks around the community and area regarding tennis. There was a couple of recommendations they made in regards to the amount of pressure on the top of the fence with the windscreens, just the flappability and the amount of sail type pressure.
I hear what you're saying.
We want to make them right, and they are.
All due respect, Madam Chair, is this, I disagree totally, because I was told 3 times in the minutes, we can go back and look at it. And I was told 3 times on 3 different occasions, Dr. Cash, that one, we had tennis people doing tennis courts.
We did.
Our turf people. And I asked 3 different times, 3 different occasions, Teddy, am I right?
Well, did the wind have anything to do with it, or is it just the
That
rain?
was my question.
So-
Is this Friday?
The poles, some of the poles have been loose for a little bit longer than now.
Yeah, it wasn't
Now,
just Friday.
not just
That's what I
Friday.
mean.
Some of those poles have been loose a little bit longer than now. I have been up checking those, looking at those posts as well. With that said, wind is a concern. The wind has not just happened on Friday. There has been wind going. I would recommend rolling those screens up in off-season. Everybody else felt the same way. Not saying it'll help or not. At the end of the day, we want to deliver quality fence installed in there that is not going to be a continued issue.
Was the material that we play on, is it good?
The material that is there,
You know, on the ground?
Coach feels good about it, with the exception of the posts, because as water gets in
No,
there, if
the
that's not
post.
sealed.
Where we playing tennis, because I played some, is it good?
The top coat.
Service that we
What's
use?
gonna happen, I've been around tennis, my wife played Division I, my daughter played the league, I understand tennis a little
But
bit.
you
We
wouldn't.
live in South Florida, but the fact of it is what I said, forward. In Florida, the wind blows a little bit, don't you think? And the fact of it is, they have wind shears, I got that. But when you put a foundation on moving soil the whole time, and you don't put poles deep enough, it doesn't matter. And if it softens at the base of it, what do you think is gonna happen to the surface? It's gonna run, it's gonna spider run, it's gonna split.
Can it be fixed?
So I have a
That's
question,
what-
just because when he mentioned the soil, I do remember there was some conversation when we were talking about putting these poles in, that there was a big push to get this done so that they could play
Their
tennis
senior
on it
matches.
that year.
That is
And
correct.
there was a recommendation that it was not the best time. So my question is does that have anything to do with, did we not let the soil settle long enough?
Here's what I'll say with my experience at Bradley, and I've been up there for about 3 years now, okay? I'm just up there dealing with football fields, now dealing with tennis courts. So I've been up there since 2020, when we started putting those in. Soils up there are a concern. There has been, and we've cored. There's been concerns even with Bradley Central's, was it the hall to the right, where we've had to come back through and restabilize things where it's washed. Soils are a concern up there. Cutting dirt at certain times of year make that worse because it can't dry out and compact. That is a reality. And so you have to use, or it's too wet to dry out and bake out and then compact. So when we did the football fields, specific example, we had the hurricanes come in, could not get compaction. We had to soil stabilize those 4 corners to get that thing to meet compaction. So timing can play a role in these things, yes.
I have a question.
I'll defer that to others in the field. These are observations and being in the field.
Okay, my question is.
Yes.
Obviously, we know there's a problem.
Yes,
We've established that.
yes.
Who's gonna pay to fix it?
So right now, first step is all fences on their dime is up here with their crews, fixing everything again, restabilizing everything. I talked with Jack today. Yes, that's on their dime. I talked with Jack today, and I said, Jack, so 6 months from now, a year from now, if we're back at the same place, what's the next step that we need to take? He said, Kyle, I want you, the board, to know that I'm in this for the long haul to make sure these fences are done right. And I will do anything and everything I can to take care of those.
What did we actually pay for one of the tennis courts?
I have to go back and
Start
look
to
at
finish, what was the pay?
Madam Chair.
I need to go back and look at that. I could pull that information for you, for sure. We've got all that.
I recommend, since we don't have those numbers in front of us, I don't want us to throw out numbers that are inaccurate, that we get
Correct.
that and we can send that to the board.
Yes, ma'am. And we'll have fencing number breakdowns, all the information. We've got all that itemized.
Madam Chair, the reason I'm saying this is because, like you said, if you're going to do due diligence on the track, you're using the soil that's about 25 yards from the track. And so if you're not careful, in my opinion, I'm not a soil professional. I'm not a drainage professional. I've been around 1 or 2 tennis court players and courts in my lifetime in all areas of the country. But my concern is, as we do our due diligence, making sure the soil up here, how is it going to affect down here? And then if we fix the fence, I'm worried about the fence, yes, but I'm more worried about the running of the surface because of the loosening of the bottom of the fence. Does that make sense?
It does, it does. If the water's creeping into the base of the fence, what's happening underneath it? Now, one of the things in the design of the tennis courts, different from the previous ones that were there, is those tennis courts now sit up on rock, different than what was up there. Our previous tennis courts had surface, asphalt, and then dirt. And so that was where it was running out from underneath.
And what happened,
Still
in my opinion,
affects.
I don't know because I can't see down, it looks like we put the poles about as far to the rock and stopped. And we didn't go deep enough with the pole.
And that's
Have
what
good
we're,
foundation.
that's what we're looking to figure out. Because where the footer was placed, if we can't go deeper, then how do we tie this thing in with the other areas we can go deeper with to pull the structure together? So we're in step one of retightening everything and making decisions forward, checking off boxes to make sure we put it in right.
I just have one last question and I'm done. So you're talking about the soil, and I know a little bit about this because I had to deal with this at my house. From a Tennessee State soil consultant. Soil doesn't change. So that soil's not gonna change 6 months to a year from now. So when we plan for the tennis courts, we should have planned all scenarios, and one of them might have been, well, maybe that wasn't the best place for it, since the soil is not. I'm just saying.
I just execute what
I'm
they.
just saying, when we plan for future things.
Yes.
We need to take in all considerations from start to finish, and soil has to be one of them, so.
Bradley wants to.
Just throwing that out there.
And they want to drive it.
Completely agree.
Same thing with Lake Forest.
I'm just
I get
saying.
it.
Madam Chairman, Madam Chairman, I think that in order for us to solve anything, we have to have engineer designs, we have to have do all those studies to move forward. So at this time, if I can turn that back over to you and reserve those questions, please.
All right, we appreciate the update, and if you'll just keep us
Thank you.
updated.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
very much.
Thank you all.
The next item on the agenda is future work sessions. Josh next.
Yeah, so over the course of the last several weeks that we've had some special called work sessions. And for those of you that don't know, we don't really get an opportunity to discuss a lot of the issues that are presented to us until the night we've got to vote on it. So these work sessions have been much appreciated. However, it's hard sometimes to work around everybody's schedule because they're set at different times and different things. So what my suggestion is, and what I would like to make a motion for us to vote on tonight, would be putting a permanent work session in on a monthly basis. So currently, we're meeting on Thursday, the first Thursday of each month. I would like to see it maybe where we have a work session on the first Thursday and then a voting session, similar to what the county commission does on that second Thursday. These would be set times that we can work with and that we know are there. And it gives us an opportunity to do our due diligence before we're making decisions and voting.
Can I second that?
Put it in the form of a motion.
So I'd like to put in the form of a motion that we have a permanent work session in place beginning the first Thursday of each month with a voting session on the second Thursday of each month. And with everything coming up, I would like to have that maybe initiated by April, because we've got a lot of budget meetings and things coming up. So I'd like to put that in the form of a motion.
I second that.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. I'll open that up for discussion.
I guess I just have some questions. So you are talking about establishing a work session every month, regardless of whether it is for budgets, custodial contracts, because large purchases, those are typically with special called meetings or work sessions. So are you talking about work sessions just to go over the agenda? And are you talking about then developing the agenda 2 weeks ahead of time? And would that not open up for changes? Because we seem to have a lot of changes with this agenda.
Yeah, so what this would do, in my opinion, and this isn't new, this is something that was done in the past, and I'm not sure before I was. Before I got here. Yeah, so before I got here, that was kind of changed, but, you know, for instance, some of the items that we pulled from the consent and moved back, some of these are some of the first times that we've seen some of these bids. Having a work session gives us an opportunity to ask some questions and have time for those questions to be answered before the vote has been brought in. And it's not just on the big things. We're voting every single meeting. We've got to vote on something. And so it gives us an opportunity to ask valid questions and to give folks time to come back with a response before we have to make a decision.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
no.
Vicki. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I am not against work sessions. I think they are valuable in some instances, but I served on the board when we had permanent work sessions. Now, what happens there, and when I say I did not serve, I was not a state board of education member, but I was the president of the Special Education Association, and I worked with that group, and I attended all of their meetings. They do or did meet at a work session. Now, the criticism is going to be that everything is laid out, that we discuss everything, and when you come into a meeting, Chairman Lee is going 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe people attending this meeting but didn't attend the work session are not aware of what you're talking about and how much work went into that.
Well, I think there would still be discussion allowed at the work session, no different than the county commission meetings. Work sessions will have to be open. You know, the work sessions we've had previously that were conducted in this room, that were videoed, there were minutes kept, records kept of everything. This, in my opinion, is bringing more transparency because it's giving more opportunity for discussion. I feel like that as a board, you know, we're the largest recipient of taxpayer funding. At 60% roughly of Bradley County taxpayer dollars, we're controlling and we're voting. And so to be able to have the opportunity to discuss different issues and to ask questions and have time and response before we make those votes, I think would just help me in doing my due diligence.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Just coming from a new school board member that's been here less than a year, and I'm gonna give some examples. Some of the stuff that was on the consent agenda, it's the first time I'm hearing about. So I pulled some things that I think need further discussion. Not that I'm being blindsided, I just feel like I'm in the dark with some things because we haven't mentioned anything about them. We've not said anything about them. We're wanting to approve some of this stuff and just let it go by on the consent agenda without any further discussion. I don't want to say yes to something and not know what I'm saying yes to.
So,
So work sessions
So
would
just
give us
one-
an
just-
opportunity
okay.
to discuss those things in further detail and give back feedback.
Okay, again, I'm not against work sessions either, but to your point that there are items on the consent agenda that you pulled with regard to, like, say for instance, the North Lee, Ocoee Middle, and Lake Forest. We recently voted on Wright Brothers to handle those particular bids and do those. So they're just coming before the board for us to vote on them.
We did, but, okay, just for instance, the Lake Forest school roof. Which roof is it? Because in August of last year, if you go back and look at Chuck McKay's email to us, it was $28,000. This one's, the bid's $61,000. And then one of them's $246,000. Which roof are you talking about? That's the questions I want to ask.
So I guess maybe we've got a little bit of confusion as to when I get the agenda and I get items on the agenda, or I get the attachments, I guess I feel like it is my job to be prepared when I come to this board meeting. I'm supposed to do my homework before I come in here. So if I have a question on which roof is this, whoever's handled these bids, which would be Chuck, I'm going to pick up the phone and call Mr. McKay and say, hey Chuck, which roof is this for? That clarifies my problem right there. So then I know.
And to that, Madam Chair, that's exactly what I'm asking for, is the ability to have that conversation. Because outside of these meetings, we can't discuss this stuff.
We can't discuss it among each other, but we can pick up the phone and call Mr. McKay, or we can call Susan, or we can call Dr. Cash and ask, you know, what roof is this for? I mean, we can do that, but now are we supposed to call each other and talk about it? Absolutely not. That's a violation of the Sunshine Law. But we can call whoever's speaking to this item and get that information.
I think this will just give us an opportunity to discuss as a board to make a decision. There have been several times that somebody else may have a different opinion than mine, but they have convinced me or shown me something that I'm not aware of, or something unique to their district that I didn't know, that the voters that voted them in did know. And this just gives us an opportunity to make a decision as a group, as a unit, more cohesive with an understanding.
As I said, I'm not against work sessions at all, but I have to look at situations where I agree with Chairman Lee. When I have a question, I pick up the phone and I communicate with the director of schools, who typically directs me to another person if that's necessary. So I get the answers to my questions through that.
Yeah, and I agree. I've done that also, but this is more, the work session gives us as a board more chance to talk to each other. No, you know, I agree. I can pick up the phone and call Dr. Cash, and she's always been gracious to answer the call or return the call very quickly and answer questions. But that still doesn't give me an opportunity to talk with my fellow board members and discuss.
I understand what you're saying there, Mr. Taylor, and I definitely do think that there are certainly times when work sessions are absolutely necessary. But I don't necessarily believe that, like, for instance, tonight, there is nothing really on the agenda, in my opinion, that really warrants a work session, because we could have picked up the phone on those particular items and just clarified very quickly what that roof was for. And in addition to that, I mean, we have to think that we are requiring all of these administrators and principals to come and sit for an extra night, that they could be home with their families, but they're having to come here and sit just because we didn't pick up the phone and call someone and ask, what roof is that?
Well, I think this goes back, Madam Chair, to even the questions that was asked to Corbin and Drew, and they didn't have some of those numbers. And so they're gonna have to go back and get them. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. In a work session, we can ask that. They have plenty enough time to retrieve the information and come back and present to us.
Well, and again, going back to your point, you said that they didn't have the numbers before us because we had a track update. We didn't have a tennis court update.
But that evolved from our discussion when we got together as a
Correct.
board to be able to discuss this.
In all due respect, Madam Chair, the track update reflected back to the fitness, because if we're going to do their due diligence, we got to talk about it all, because that, like Rachel said, that's one soil. And both you and Ms. Beatty, which gave a great point, you're not against work sessions, so why we would not have them?
Because I don't think that they're necessary every single time. I think that it is, for us not to do our homework on our end as board members is doing a disservice to to the Bradley County School employees by requiring them to prepare unnecessarily for 2 meetings and to be here because Dr. Cash requires them to be here.
And maybe that's something we need to look at to have adjusted. But, you know, us as a board, I feel like that every time we have a vote, it's worth having some discussion on. I think that every vote, even the small ones, are significant.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a substitute motion to establish regular scheduled work sessions for items that go beyond the scope of the typical business meeting on an as-needed basis.
All right, so Ms. Beatty has made a substitute motion to Mr. Taylor's motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I've got something else to say, I'm not saying I'm part of that, but for the sake of her being able to have a vote, I'll second it, just for the sake of her getting your voting on it, and putting everybody on the record.
So I've got a motion by Ms. Beatty, a second by Mr. Bryson on the substitute motion. Are there any discussions on the substitute motion?
I do.
Mr. Bryson.
Work sessions are great, I don't have no problem. I'm retired and I work at Life Bridges, but it's more fun than it is work. But I could easily do it. Some people that work seem to have some difficulties getting to some meetings. But my issue, more than anything, is not having it, the work session. And not with yours, Vicki. But mine is the fact that Nancy is not here. And we had a incident earlier in the year when we were somewhere where we were talking about some property, and we did not want to deal with it because you weren't here, Rachel. And I voted to not do it, just like everybody else, because it was in your district. So we said no. This will change, and Nancy might very well be for it. I kind of think she is, but I still want to hear her on the record saying it in front of God and country and everybody. And one time, I couldn't be here for a meeting several years ago when we were electing a chairman, and Joy Weathers and the board graciously changed the meeting so I could be there. We couldn't change, apparently, the meeting for Nancy, and she can't, what do you call it, bought in. And I think Nancy deserves the same respect that we gave everybody else, and me and Rachel, and I think for that reason, I would pass and not vote for either one of them. So you're not going to have a majority.
I just want to go on record and say, I don't want to inconvenience anyone on the staff, school board, or anything. But what I do want to do is be a good steward with the money that we're rewarded. And sometimes I personally can't make that decision unless I have had some discussion on things. I've made a request that we go to all the schools and see what their capital outlay projects are in person so I can get a better understanding. Now, whether or not any of the other school board members want that, I don't know. But for me to make some logical decisions going forward on anything, I think work sessions are important, especially when you got to know what you're voting for or what you're saying yes to. And sometimes I don't have what I need to have that.
But what about when we decided not to do because you weren't here?
Oh, well, we don't have to vote that tonight.
That's what I mean.
We don't have to vote that.
Motion. I'm probably for his motion. I'm just not for it with Nancy.
No, we don't have to vote for it tonight, but it is something that we need to discuss.
It needs to be voted.
Yes.
One way or the other.
Are there those that are already aware that they may not be present at the next meeting?
It's my understanding that.
I'll be here. I'll be here. I'll be here.
So
Could we not, if somebody was, could we not change the meeting unless they're going to Norway like Nancy and take their money?
Well, I think the problem with that is that they schedule, like, our regular scheduled board meetings, is they schedule those very early on to give those to all of the schools so that they can plan around those and they can plan their events around those so that they don't schedule anything, if at all possible, the nights that we have board meetings so that they can be here for any particular reason that they may be on the agenda for that night. So again, that's kind of another issue with going back now and rescheduling work sessions when we're coming up on the busiest time of the year with the end of the year. I know when we scheduled this last work session, we literally rescheduled it 4 times because we couldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get there in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, I understand, that's why I'm asking for these, and they,
Well, even with my motion, I don't think any of us disagree with work sessions. I think we disagree with the frequency. I think that having a regular scheduled time frame is important, whether you actually have it every month or on an as-needed basis. You can always put it into your board calendar, and then if it's not necessary, then you can not have the meeting.
Well, I'm not opposed to having a meeting, period, but I oppose having a meeting or having a vote from my friend Ms. Nancy, and I have not talked to her because she's in Norway. I don't know if she can, but what I'm saying is, if I could talk to her, whatever, and she said, yeah, I still would. Because we had the same courtesy for Miss Rachel, and I'd do it again, and we all, every one of us. And Dr. Cash was wanting to do something, she wasn't not wanting to do anything really, but just check something, and we all said no. Rachel's not here, we're not gonna do it.
Madam Chair. One of the things that I would like to point out, really in line with Miss Betty and Josh and Taylor, Mr. Taylor, is that to schedule a work session as a hold spot, I think there's like no harm in that at all. And then, you know, based on what's on that agenda, we could decide at that time whether it was a necessary or not. There are some things that have to have a work session, such as budgeting. If we're planning big projects, those have to have a work session. So I would think that this board would be fine to schedule a work session and have that hold date. That way everybody can schedule their calendars to be sure that we are available. And then if it is, like there are some weeks where we are just simply, you know, celebrating things that happen or giving reports and those kind of things, which you may not need to have a work session, but if you have a hold and you need it, it's there so that it's on the schedule. The second thing that I would like to say is that as we are scheduling and building out agendas and pieces like that, you know, we are oftentimes, you know, like today's our meeting, and if we are going to try to do it 2 weeks after your meeting, that does not allow my staff time, but I would recommend that you have a work session maybe on a Monday or a Tuesday in the same week that you have your board, if you're going to do that. Because that way that allows my staff to work and get there, if we're going to need to have it. But my recommendation is in line with actually both, to put a hold in the schedule, and then we can look at those agendas and see if it is a mandatory meeting that we have to have, or if it's something that we can pass on, but at least you've reserved it.
When is it required for Amanda to have the meeting out?
Sir?
When is it required for Amanda to have the agenda out?
5 days before.
Calendar days or working days? Which kind?
Depends on what definition you're using.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that would be, we would have to go back and determine that, but we try to get it out 5 regular days. So it would be not work days, but
Friday.
Calendar days.
My understanding from talking with an attorney with TSBA, because of that policy, I think it's in the board operations series, but when you do not list it specifically, it reverts to calendar. So, you know, so you would count Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So it is Wednesday, Thursday. It is calendar. Now,
So
that
it has to
was
be
my
up on Friday?
interpretation From her.
Is that what it?
I just said that.
Mr. Bryson, we do try to have it on Fridays, but like this Friday, we were out, so I believe Miranda
Yeah.
got that out on that following day. But my point is just, a work session, in my opinion, you would need your work session the same week that you're having your meeting, so that you could have your agenda ready to discuss, if that's what this board hopes to do.
Well, it is, I think that the thing I'm talking about though is having that agenda, it's just a very similar concept of what the county commission does. They have a work session, a voting session every week. So you got a work session, a voting session, but it's the same agenda. It's just, or the same items on the agenda. So I'm not asking to create more agendas. I'm asking that we get the opportunity to take the agenda and as a board discuss that, discuss what we're going to vote. It can still be discussed the night of the vote, no different than what we're doing here this evening, and then make an educated decision on what we're doing on behalf of our constituents.
Madam Chair, do you want me to repeat my substitute
Yes,
motion?
we have to vote on the substitute motion first, and then that one fails, then we revert back and vote on the original motion. So, Ms. Beatty, will you please restate your substitute motion?
My substitute motion is to establish regular scheduled work sessions for items that go beyond the scope of the business meeting on an as-needed basis.
Okay, that is the motion, substitute motion that we are voting on right now. Miranda, will you call roll?
Yes, Ms. Vicky Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. Ted Bryson,
No.
Ms. Amanda Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Jeff Lovinger,
No.
Mr. Josh Taylor,
No.
Ms. Rachel Goins.
No.
4 no, 2 yes, motion denied.
Failed.
Failed.
Okay, so now we will revert back to Mr. Taylor's motion, which is, restate your motion, please.
I would like to have regular scheduled work sessions on a monthly basis, the first Thursday of each month, with a voting session on the second Thursday of each month.
Okay, so voting, work session.
Work session on the first Thursday of the month, and then a voting session the second Thursday of the month. It's one extra, so I'm asking for one extra meeting per month.
Since Ms. Nancy's not here, does anybody know how many votes you have to have?
Well, there's 5 of us, so you have to agree to pass.
What?
No, you have to have 4 to
Four.
pass.
My bad,
Because
4.
the majority,
The majority
the
is
board
four.
is a vote of
A whole.
7, so you have to have at
Okay.
least 4. So, Miranda, will you call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Vicky Beatty,
No.
Mr. Ted Bryson,
Pass.
Ms. Amanda
Wait a
Lee,
minute, I'm passing till Nancy's here. Then I'm with you.
Ms. Amanda Lee,
No.
Mr. Josh Taylor,
Yes.
Dr. Jeff Lovinger,
Yes.
Ms. Rachel Goins.
Yes.
3 yes, 2 no, motion fails.
All right. So,
In our bylaws, is that how that works if we have one that abstains with the members that are present? Do we not have to carry the majority with those that are present?
It's the
we have to
majority.
have 4 votes total because we are a board of 7. So regardless of whether Mr. Bryson was to pass, even if he was to have voted yes or no, we still have to have 4 votes in the affirmative.
Okay, who can bring this, somebody can bring this motion up again at the next meeting. Just- Dr. Case, do you know
It can be
what
put on
the
the
rules say?
agenda.
A member of the losing squad or something?
It can be.
Is that not right?
Yes, it can be requested to be put on next month's agenda, correct.
And Madam Chair, it is in policy that you have to have a quorum. And
Correct.
then you have to have the majority, which would be 4. Because a quorum is 4.
Plurality, and we do have a forum.
All right, moving on to the items that were taken off the consent agenda. We will begin with item 4D1, and that is the North Lee bids, Ocoee Middle School, and Lake Forest. Mr. McKay, you want to come up and explain that, please?
The figures for a roof, a ballasted roof, is $8.50 a square foot. And that Lake Forest is a nasty job. That is flat roof on 2 buildings, the storage building and the wrestling building. And they're 1,500 square foot each. They're 8-foot walls called parapet walls you have to climb to get over. So you have to carry up a ladder and drop it up, and you're gonna have to work on that. They're dangerous because they're Tectum, which is a fiberglass board. You have to be careful not to fall through them once you strip all the roofing off. So when I got pricing, I was, the contractor that gave me that price of that original $24,000 you're asking about was right on the money. He was under, 1,000 under, okay? So of course, when you put things out to bid, the price goes up, and supply and demand. So that's what's happened here. Now, on the other hand, at Ocoee, I said, Ocoee, we're gonna need $750,000 to do those 2 large roofs, and they're way under. So you win some, you lose some. That's just how it happens, you know? That's why a lot of times I ask for money that I saved here, because I need it for a different project, you know? So that's, I have 2 roofers in the room. If you need, you want more roofing, you know, expertise questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. McKay before we vote on this?
I had a question on the LFMS roofing. There were, 3 bids that were brought in there? Porter Roofing, $61,000, Jetty H at $246,000, and Atlas at $61,000. Were they all quoting the exact same job? I mean, that's a lot of money difference in there.
Yeah, we all met at the same time. Kyle was with me as a witness. There were probably 15 companies that showed up and only 4 bids. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you never know on the bids, you know, what you're gonna get. Mm-hmm. And we have a pre-bid meeting so we can answer the same questions at the same time. And afterwards, if I get a call, I've got to call back everyone that was there. That's why we take a list of your phone number and address, phone number and name. We call you back and say, this question was asked, and this is what we answered.
So, but Jetty H, the company that I'm referring to, that was so astronomical in those, in that bid process for Lake Forest, that is the one that you were recommending, it's the same company you're recommending for OMS.
Well,
the way the bid was structured, we had the opportunity to either take it as a whole project, or take roof components individual. So in this case, we could have said, we're going to take the overall total of Atlas because they're the lowest bid of all 3 roofs.
Right.
But to protect our dollars, the way we structured that bid process was we could either take the whole lowest bid or we could take the lowest bidder on that job specific. So that's why all 3 are broke out that way. So in this case, Atlas came in the lowest overall, but if you look back at the Ocoee, which is the largest roof, JDH, who is a very qualified company, they came in at $155 for that one specific, so we said, we want JDH to do that one specific to save, and then Atlas, the other ones, because they came in lower on the other 2. So it's a way for us to structure things to try to get the best bang for our dollar.
That part I understand. I was just trying to figure that, I mean, JDH was actually several $1,000s less on the Ocoee Middle, and then $180,000 more on that one project at Lake Forest. I'm assuming you guys asked the question.
We all had heard the same question.
Everybody was there, the same walk.
Yeah. Same
Tom
walk.
from Wright Brothers was there. They're the ones handling this on our behalf. They asked us questions. Everybody in attendance on that piece of paper was there, heard the same things that we all stated.
Yes.
Everybody was a part of that. And this is what.
Just like the addendum, the only Atlas, who's here in the audience, they're the only ones who bid the addendum at North Lee. That's a roof over the dining room and cafeteria that's just started leaking. It was one of our very first white TPOs. I did not do it, but it only had a 10-year warranty. I go for all 30-year warranties. I go for the biggest warranties. I don't want to do this again, you know? But Atlas was the only one who bid it on that roof. Why didn't all the other companies bid? I don't know. These are sealed bids.
Do you think maybe, I know that you mentioned when you came up there, Lake Forest is a nasty roof. Maybe
Yeah.
they just didn't want to get on that.
It's a bad job.
So
It
they
is.
bid way out, so they knew they weren't going to get it.
When we tore down the school, when we built the new Lake Forest, we left all the piping, insulation, you know, there's a lot of demo scrap up there that should not be there. So a vacuum truck is gonna have a hard time getting those rocks off. It's a ballasted roof, you gotta get rid of the rock, you gotta deal with it. It's ugly. And to get it over an 8-foot wall, that's a whole nother story. I don't even know if a vacuum truck can do that. I don't know.
Madam Chair, one, I want to commend you, not recommend you, but commend you, that you did due diligence in getting multiple bids, which in essence, that will be a motion I'll make at the next board meeting, at a minimum, we need to get 3 bids for things. Because just like what we said, case in point.
And there's times where that works out great. There's other times when 3 people don't show.
Well, and listen, I get bids all the time.
Yep.
Foreman does too. We have
Oh,
this
yes.
discussion.
Yes.
The fact of it is, if we don't get 3 bids, we come back and have a conversation how we can
Try
get
to do it
bids,
different.
how we can market it better, because you get yourself in a position. It's gonna save the taxpayers money.
Yep.
We're gonna put the right people on the job when we do the bidding right.
Yep.
And so, I just think to do our due diligence, that there's a process that we need to take that will save us in the long run. Personal opinion.
We're here to serve, however we can.
I have a question, I guess, or a comment and a question to Dr. Lovingood's statements.
Sure.
I know that this has happened in the past where it was very difficult for schools, because I have had principals talk with me before on smaller projects especially, to get those 3 bids or those 3 quotes. Well, what you're doing sometimes, especially on smaller projects, you're delaying maybe up to a semester of trying to get different people to bid on that small project. So, Dr. Lovingood, there's the good with the bad, and I see it on the bigger projects, but we have a lot of smaller projects that our principals have to work with and get quotes. And so, I mean, I'm sure you're involved as well, Chuck. But that can be difficult, and then you've delayed a new back room, or you've delayed something for quite a time period. That's my only concern, Dr. Lovingood.
Well, Ms. Beatty, with all due respect, I love our teachers. Just like we said earlier about forecasting TCAP test. We look back here and say, well, there's going to be a problem. So let's do our due diligence as educators to train and equip our kids so we can forecast scores. And we can look at retention. The key in that as educators or any businessman is to forecast need soon enough to get bids and to be aware of the problem before there's an urgency, like we gotta have it tomorrow. I think you're right, I understand bidding little projects or big projects, but we, like these men do, they have to forecast issues that are gonna come in the future. So let's do our due diligence, let's get our bids. If we can't get more than 3, let's have a conversation about how we can market the issue sooner, just like educators do with testing.
And more sources help.
Yes.
Or somebody said put it in the, what did they call it? Where you get
Social
on-
media,
Yeah.
all your social media.
I think in a perfect world, we would be able to forecast every problem that we were going to run into, but unfortunately, I think there's definitely some things we can plan ahead for.
Yes.
But then there are also, like, we don't know if the heat and air unit goes out tomorrow. Sometimes, I think, I want to get 3 bids on everything.
Yes.
Have I come to realize that sometimes that's more difficult than others? Yes.
You're gonna be
but-
shocked next year. I'm gonna ask for $500,000 for 100 doors. You're gonna be shocked.
Somebody asking for what?
I'll be asking for 500,000 for 100 doors.
Madam Chairman, I would just like to remind everyone that our business office follows all the state bids and the state laws regarding bids. We do try our very best and we'll work hard to get 3 bids, but there will be some instances where those bids don't come in, but we will definitely try. We always try. We always want to be competitive and get those competitive bids, and we're very fortunate that we had them for this roof, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
So we're going to need a motion on the bid for Oakwood Middle, Lake Forest, and North Lee. So if anyone like to entertain a motion to approve the bid recommendation?
I'll make a motion to approve the bid recommendation.
Okay, I've got a motion by Mr. Bryson. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
I've got 2 seconds. Are there any more discussions on? If not, Miranda, if you please call the roll.
Mr. Bryson?
Yes.
Ms. Beatty?
Yes.
Dr. Lovington?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Goins?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
The next item is item 4D3, which is the gold cafeteria tables and chairs. Gold cafeteria tables.
Yes, I'm coming to you to recommend the cafeteria tables for Gold Academy, and there are 48 chairs and tables to fit students there. We've never actually purchased equipment for the school, so we're excited to have new chairs and tables. Do you guys have any questions?
My question was, we only had one estimate.
Okay, that went through the TIPS program, which is a national purchasing cooperative. And so we
That's
purchased.
what we normally do?
They're all state approved, which means they're already vetted, and which does not require 3 bids. They're on the state approved list.
That is.
Okay.
Thank you
those
for the
do-
explanation.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That means you do not require 3 bids because the state has already vetted them.
Correct.
And they're on a list that you can basically choose from.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that similar to the way we do computers and?
Yes, ma'am.
The state has already approved because they've already done the bid package for us.
Are there any more questions on the gold cafeteria tables and chairs? If not, I need someone to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for my friend and neighbor to approve their motion.
I second that.
I've got a motion by Mr. Bryson and a second by Mr. Taylor. Is there any more questions? Not Miranda, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Rachel Goins?
Yes.
Mr. Ted Bryson?
Yes.
Dr. Jeff Lovington?
Yes.
Mr. Josh Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Amanda Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Vicki Bailey?
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is policy 6.3071, which is a student alcohol and drug testing policy. I will turn that over to you, Mrs. Bailey.
Okay, I had written down, let me pull these. Did you say 6.3071 and 6.309? Correct. Let me start with 6.309 because I have it in front of me.
Okay.
This is zero tolerance. The zero tolerance policy and what TSBA recommended as far as updates are very similar. It's just that they were laid out differently. Our zero tolerance was more detailed when it came to weapons and dangerous instruments. And our policy also included electronic threats, which is a protection for students and staff. So the detail in ours is, even though they're similar, the detail in ours is more specific as I said, when it comes to weapons and dangerous instruments and the addition of electronic threats, since this was not per se the same as the zero tolerance policy that you have in your board packets from TSBA to compare with Bradley County Schools, I did talk with the attorneys at TSBA, and they reviewed this before it was ever approved and presented. So if you have questions about a particular section, I'll be glad to attempt to answer those or defer to Dr. Cash.
Are you asking one on yours first, and then I'm
Well,
asking?
yeah, I guess you kind of covered both of those at the same time. And I think you addressed and answered some of the concerns that I had. So we've had our attorney and TSBA attorneys look at this.
Yes.
Anytime, you're involving minors and drug testing and random testing and allowing those to pick and choose who is going to be, that was the only concern that I had, to make sure that we're covered on that when dealing with our minor students.
Okay, you're on 6.3071, correct? Because I was on zero tolerance.
I was the one that had the zero tolerance.
Okay.
Mayor, I think what Mr. Taylor was saying was, when you referenced talking to the attorneys and going through that satisfied what he wanted to be sure we were covered legally, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, it was. 2 attorneys reviewed it.
So just to,
On both of these.
so just to clarify, we had, and I don't know if this was prior to, I don't know exactly when, but Ms. Beatty, we voted to have Ms. Beatty do policies. Thank God she does them, because
Thank you.
I do not want to do them. So anytime there is a question on policies, I do encourage you for her to be your contact person, because she works all month long with the TSBA attorney, with our attorney. These policies go through,
And with Patty Phillips. Sometimes
through
Miranda.
multiple
Dr. Cash.
eyes. Depending on the department, like, it may go through secondary supervisors or attendants, if it involves attendants. They all look and tweak and say, well, we need to think about this. So she can definitely, if you have a question, refer you on to, well, we changed this because so-and-so told us we needed to think about this. So she's got a wealth of knowledge in that particular area as to all of the eyes it came across before it actually come to us as a board.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, I think that it more impresses me that Dr. Cash is looking at it than TSBA.
She is the very last one that looks at
At least
it.
she's an educator.
Madam Chair, I look at them and I go, whoa, 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 let me do some checking, and
And I go, whoa, 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 back.
Yeah.
It makes me feel a lot better because I
Yeah,
love
good
TSBA,
dialogue.
but they're not an educator in the crew. You are, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it, and thank you for answering the question. And I know you said, you'd encourage us to get with Vicki, but I guess as board members, I'm not really supposed to contact Vicki outside of these meetings, but I can direct to Dr. Cash and then she can get with you
Absolutely.
to kind of answer these questions.
Absolutely.
Or informational.
You can definitely call Miss Betty and ask a question about a policy.
Okay.
Yeah, if
You
there's
can't
something on
deliberate
that.
about voting, but you can definitely call her and ask her about a policy.
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, are you on zero tolerance?
I am on zero tolerance.
Okay.
So I just have a couple questions about, so zero tolerance to me is, that means we don't tolerate anything that's listed on here, and there's several things listed. Firearms, weapons, drugs, assault, and under every paragraph at the end, it talks about they're expelled for a period of not less than 1 year calendar, but at the end of every paragraph, there's the director of schools shall have the authority to modify this expulsion requirement on a case-by-case basis. I'm not trying to sound contradictory, but that contradicts the zero tolerance
Madam Chair.
part of it. If we're zero tolerance, we're zero tolerance.
Well, actually, the state law puts that in there as a maximum, and then they give the director of schools the ability to assess the individual pieces. So there's a difference between expulsion
and then assigning them to like an alternative school. If you expel a kid, then they're out and they're not being educated. So the legislative laws give the directors of schools that authority to remand them to an alternative school or a zero tolerance.
So I understand the difference between the two schools. But I guess my question is, wouldn't we have like an exemption? Because anybody that brings drugs on school, that should be zero tolerance. It doesn't matter what it is.
Madam Chairman, if it's a zero tolerance, they have to come before a disciplinary hearing. There are actions with a zero tolerance that move beyond the school level. So that's part of that zero tolerance, is that it's no longer a school level decision. And if it is zero tolerance, you are now involving law enforcement. And so in law enforcement, we step back from law enforcement. We're not allowed to intervene with the law enforcement. But that zero tolerance has to come before a board hearing. Not a board hearing, they have to come before a disciplinary hearing. And in that disciplinary hearing, they make recommendations based on what they hear and what they see. Sometimes the recommendation may be, Gold Academy for 6 months or a year with counseling. They make a lot of different decisions. If it is, we also, Ms. Goins, a lot of times when the law enforcement is involved, they take it much further than we do. But we also have that option if that disciplinary hearing feels like that child does not need to be on any school grounds, they have that option.
Will you read again one more time the list of things that you get there, like video or whoever?
And those zero tolerance are codified in law. Well, I can read you the.
Is alcohol one of them?
It's weapons and dangerous instruments, firearms, drugs, assault, and electronic threats. And as I said, all of these are either in U.S. Code or Tennessee Code annotated.
Maybe I didn't hear, did you say drugs?
Drugs, yes.
But not alcohol?
It's listed under.
It's under drugs.
Because it didn't used to be.
Controlled substance, legend, drugs. So it's under the drugs. Now, there is a policy thought. It's also under drug-free, isn't it? Drug-free school. Yeah.
All right, so do we have any more questions on policy number 6.309, which is zero tolerance? If not, can I have someone entertain a motion to approve policy 6.309?
Since I typically do, I make a motion to approve zero tolerance offenses.
I second that motion.
Got a motion and a second by Ms. Goins. Are there any more discussions? Not Miranda?
Ms. Vicki Beatty?
Yes.
Ms. Amanda Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Josh Taylor?
Yes.
Dr. Jeff Lovingood?
Yes.
Mr. Ted Bryson?
Yes.
Ms. Rachel Goins?
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
All right, the next policy is policy 6.3071, student alcohol and drug testing.
Here again, we do have the alcohol in this one as well, so it's 3 different policies.
Well,
But
before you get into, and somebody else may have a question, but the question I had, the reason I wanted to pull it, I think you've already answered, is that I know others have looked at it, and I just didn't have a full understanding of that. This was the first time that I had seen that, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. I make a motion that we approve student alcohol and drug testing 6.3071.
I've got a motion by Ms. Beatty. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a second by Mr. Taylor. Are there any more discussions? No, Miranda, please call the roll.
Dr. Jeff Lovingood?
Yes.
Mr. Josh Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Amanda Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Vicki Beatty?
Yes.
Ms. Rachel Goins?
Yes.
Mr. Ted Bryson?
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
All righty. The next item on the agenda is announcements. So March the 13th through 17th, we will have schools closed for spring break. On March the 22nd, the Capital Outlay Committee will be meeting. March the 23rd will be the Bradley County Job Fair. April the 7th, schools will be closed for Good Friday, and then we will also be closed April the 10th for Stockpile Staff Development Day. Our next board meeting will be on April the 13th. And also want to announce that tomorrow the Bradley Barretts will play at 12:30 in Murfreesboro. As they're still in for the state title.
Make sure it's 11:30 there.
Also in April, and I know that our business office has not solidified a date, but we will get with you on a date because we have to have a work session for the budget. My apologies to everybody, but we have to have a work session.
Are there any items, agenda items to add to the next board meeting?
I have two.
Okay.
I'd like to have an agenda item to look at work sessions. And I would like to have an agenda item look at a minimum of 3 bids.
Are there any other items? All right, thank you for your patience. We're adjourned.
Thank y'all.